My colleague Namrata Brar caught up with Mr. Arvind Panagariya on a variety of issues. What we're going to do here is basically play out two portions of that interview. You'll hear the full interview a little later on the show. But Mr. Panagariya specifically on public sector banks, what needs to be done to sort of fix the asset quality issues there, and about, of course, PSU disinvestments. That's coming up.
Will there be simplification in the state-run banks as well? The PSUs, do you feel there's privatization in that coming very soon?
I think you see now both at this stage, from trying to just judge by the interviews that Mr. Modi had given during the campaign, my sense is that he believes more in professionalization of the PSUs than I think in outright sales of the PSUs. For sure, compulsion for revenues will certainly lead to some dilution of the public sector equity in these, but whether he would actually outright privatize, I think remains to be seen. Banks is an interesting case, of course. Banks currently, public sector banks are are suffering from certain weaknesses because of very large volume of non-performing loans and restructured loans. They are almost 10% now of the total loans. And I think that their action would be required. So again, I have argued in terms of 2 or 3 instrumentalities and use them in combination rather than rely on only one. And these are that some of the revenues get used to recapitalize the banks, but also some dilution happens of the public equity in the banks so that the banks can then raise equity from the market. So that kind of does bring them a little bit another step closer to eventual privatization if that's what the government finally decides to do. And third, of course, some of the banks are some of the specific banks are in much worse shape, where the restructured loans and non-performing assets easily exceed 15%. There, I think the government could take the opportunity to consolidate banking system by merging some of these weaker banks with some of the stronger banks, though not the State Bank of India, which is already very large. What we want is the creation of, through consolidation, creation of another few larger banks, and the current weaknesses of some certain banks provides a good opportunity to do that.
Okay, the other focus has been energy, road, ports, gas and rail. This is something that everyone's been talking about. But in terms of coal privatization, there have been some rumors doing the round, including a possible breakup of Coal India. Do you feel the mandate will push that through?
Yeah, I mean, I don't expect that privatization actually will happen, but coal is an area like railways that Mr. Modi places a very high priority on, and he repeatedly talked during his campaign that here was coal.
Okay, the other focus has been energy, road, ports, gas and rail. This is something that everyone's been talking about. But in terms of coal privatization, there have been some rumors doing the round, including a possible breakup of Coal India. Do you feel the mandate will push that through?
Yeah, I mean, I don't expect that privatization actually will happen, but coal is an area like railways that Mr. Modi places a very high priority on, and he repeatedly talked during his campaign that here was coal sitting under the mines, under the ground, and here was excess capacity among the generation companies with a very low plant load factor, and here the nation was in dark. So it is graphically used to put that way. So I think coal is a major priority for him, and because ultimately that's the road to electricity goes through coal. So he would certainly want to do something, and clearly breaking up Coal India is one of the steps that he needs to take. But he'll also need to build some railway lines. I'm told that there are coal mines where output can be increased very rapidly. These are mines, I think in Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand and Odisha. And apparently all you need is, but these are isolated, a bit far out, so there's no transportation means for coal to be brought. But according to the reports that I've seen, about 300 kilometers of railway is all you need to build. So that also ought to be built fast. And apparently these reports suggest that very quickly you can raise coal output by almost 300 million tons. So that's a huge hike over our current production. So I think all those steps ought to be taken, and that really gets us going on the electricity front, and we can begin to take electricity to more and more households, particularly in, again, two states which really are very far behind on this front are Bihar and UP.
Mr. Modi has spoken about China being an inspiration for him, that he wants to get India into the superpower status of China. How is he going to do this? His promise of building 100 new cities, promise of building freight corridors and bullet trains. Is it all going to come in despite the fact that he is saying that we will protect some of those welfare schemes, the subsidy schemes like Narega, which were instituted by the UPA government? So on one side, some of the subsidies are going to be protected, and the fact is we get only 3% of our entire population paying income tax. So where are the revenues going to come in from?
Oh, that's a million-dollar question, Namrata. So this will have to be phased out. Obviously, you can't start building bullet trains right away. But let me try to build a scenario that, first of all, at least initially, one can begin by building some of the infrastructure. In particular, road construction needs to be speeded up, highways. Electricity, I think that can be done with relatively limited resources. Good progress can be made because a lot of investment has happened, but because the lack of availability of coal or gas, the generation has been low, and as a result we have very low capacity utilization. If you look at the plant load factors, they've been very low. So some of these things can be done. Some revenues can also be freed up through ending some of the subsidies which are clearly not going to the poor. They're not part of our social programs. Things like diesel and petrol subsidies. I think these can be ended by simply unifying the price of petrol and diesel to the market price. So you gain substantial revenues there. I think we could also, UPA government had actually reduced the number of subsidized gas cylinders, cooking gas cylinders from 9 to 6, but then as election came forward, they raised it back to 9. I think we can go back to 6, so that also does free up some part of the revenue. So these are the ways, broaden the tax base, although that may be not in the very first year.